The world had changed long ago. Humans ruled the cities, the skies, and the lands. But now, machines had taken everything. The Kellner Empire came from the stars. They did not speak. They did not ask. They only took. They turned Earth into a cold factory. Giant towers covered the land, each one a furnace. These were not simple machines. These were power plants that ran on human life. The Kellner found a way to pull energy from human bodies. They called it clean extraction. Humans called it burning. Rick worked in Furnace Sector 12. He was not a soldier or a guard. He was just a repair worker. His job was to check the machines, fix broken wires, and report anything unusual. He wore a gray uniform and carried a small tool bag. His face always looked tired. He had no family left, no friends. His town had been taken 5 years ago. The people had been taken first, then the buildings. Only the smoke stayed behind. Rick had been spared because he could fix machines. The Kellner kept him alive for that reason only. Rick never spoke unless needed. He walked the metal halls of the furnace, with his head down. The walls were hot, the lights always red. Every day was the same. He saw people coming. He never saw them leave. The prisoners were kept in small cells, like glass boxes. They were not allowed to speak. The air was dry and hot. Most of them looked half dead already. When it was their time, a metal arm would come down, scan their code, and pull them into the energy chamber. That's where they were boiled, slowly. Rick never looked at the prisoners. He didn't want to see their faces. It made his hands shake. But one day, something changed. It was late. Rick was checking a broken pipe near cell 47. Steam hissed from the crack. He knelt down to tighten the bolt. As he worked, he heard a soft sound. Not a machine. Not steam. It was a voice. Please. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Inside cell 47. A girl was sitting on the floor. She looked no older than 20. Her face was pale. Her hair dirty, but her eyes were open. She was looking right at him. And her hand was through the small gap at the bottom of the glass. Her fingers touched his boot. Please, she said again, softer. Rick did not move for a full minute. His mind felt blank. No one had spoken to him. In years, no prisoner had ever looked at him like that. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with hope. He looked around. The hallway was empty. No drone. No guard. Just the hum of the furnace. He leaned forward. What is your name? He whispered. Luma, she said. Rick stood up quickly. He had broken the rule. No speaking to prisoners. No contact. If the system recorded this moment, he would be taken too. He took a step back, but he could not walk away. Her voice had changed something inside him. Luma was breathing hard. Her lips were dry. Her arms were thin. When is your number up? Rick asked. Tomorrow, she replied. His throat felt dry. He had seen that chamber. He knew what happened. It was not quick. It was not silent. You must go, she said. If they see you, you'll be gone too. Rick took another step back, but his feet stopped again. He looked into her eyes. They were still alive. He opened his bag and took out a small water pack. He slid it under the cell gap. She pulled it quickly and drank. Thank you, she said. Rick nodded. Then he turned and walked away, fast. His heart was beating too loud. That night, he could not sleep. He lay in his small metal room, staring at the ceiling. The furnace shook every few hours. That meant another person had been used for energy. He thought of Luma, her voice, her hand, her eyes. He thought of her word please. The next morning, Rick walked slowly to the control room. His steps were heavy. He passed guards, past machines, past the hot walls and red lights. He knew the rules, but he also knew he could not let her die. Not like that. He reached cell 47. Luma was still inside. She stood when she saw him. He said, nothing. He looked at the scanner pad. He pulled out his card. One swipe could open it. One choice could end everything he knew. She looked at him. Her eyes said more than words. He took a deep breath and swiped the card. The lock clicked. A soft beep followed. The glass door of cell 47 slid open. Luma stared at Rick. unsure if it was real. For a moment, she didn't move. Then Rick stepped in and caught her before she fell. Her legs were weak. Her body shook. But she was breathing. She was free. "Can you walk?" Rick asked. "I'll try," she whispered. Rick helped her up. He supported her with one arm and looked down both sides of the hallway. Red lights blinked along the walls. The cameras turned in slow circles. Timing was everything. Rick had worked in the furnace for years. He knew the system. At this hour, the patrols passed every 6 minutes. They had 5. He guided her through a side maintenance door. The metal creaked. Inside was a narrow tunnel, used only by repair workers. It led behind the walls, where pipes and wires crawled like veins. The heat inside was strong, but it was better than being seen. Luma coughed and leaned against the wall. Rick handed her another water pack. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I don't know," he replied. He watched her drink. Her hands still trembled. Her clothes were thin, stained from weeks in the cell. She had marks on her wrist where the metal bands had held her. But she did not complain. She kept walking when Rick motioned forward. They moved through the dark path. Steam hissed from broken pipes. Sparks dropped from overhead wires. Rick led her down a ladder into a lower level. This was where the broken parts of the furnace were dumped. The machines here were too old to use. No guards came here anymore. "This way," Rick said. Luma followed, her feet dragging across the dusty floor. They reached a small storage room. Rick had kept it as a private work area. It was hidden behind thick panels. Inside, there was a small bench, tools, and a lamp powered by an old battery. Rick closed the door and locked it. They were safe for now. "Rest here," he said. Luma sat down, breathing heavily. Her eyes looked around the room. She saw the tools, the wiring maps, in a corner where Rick had kept supplies. It was not much, but it was shelter. "Thank you," she said. K nodded and sat across from her. They stayed quiet for a long time. The only sound was the low hum of the furnace overhead. Finally, Luma spoke again. "I escaped once before," she said. "Months ago, I found an old air vent. It led to the waste section. I thought I could run, but they caught me." Rick listened closely. "They didn't kill me. They just waited, threw me back in, like I was nothing. I promised myself I'd never stop trying again." Rick looked down at his hands. "I used to think there was no point," he said. "That helping anyone would only get me killed. That nothing would change. But you helped me," Luma said. "Yes," he replied, "because I couldn't walk away again." Luma leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. "There's a group," she said. "A human group, hidden in the lower tunnels. They call themselves the Ember Group. I found them before. They're planning something." Rick sat up straighter. "A resistance, yes. They believe we can fight back. They're building a plan to shut down one of the furnaces. Maybe more. If we take one, others will rise. The Kellner system is big, but not perfect." Rick thought about that. He had seen the flaws in the machines. He had fixed many of them himself. Maybe what she said was true. "Can you take me to them?" he asked. Luma looked surprised. "You want to join them?" "I want to do more than fix broken pipes," he said. "If I helped you, maybe I can help them too." She smiled for the first time. Double quotes, "Yes, I can take you. But we need to wait. You said the guards check every 6 minutes. They'll notice I'm gone." "They will," Rick said. "But I can delay the alert. I can rewrite the logs." "How long do we have?" "2 days. After that, they'll lock down everything. Then we move tomorrow," she said. Rick stood up and opened a hidden panel. Inside were food packs, an old med kit, and spare clothes. He handed her the clean set. "Change and eat. You need strength." Luma nodded and took them. As she changed behind a cloth divider, Rick stared at the map of the furnace system on the wall. He had memorized every hallway, every vent, and every power line. But for the first time, he was not looking to repair it. He was looking to break it. Luma stepped out in fresh clothes. She looked stronger already. The color was returning to her face. "We'll need to be careful," she said. "The Ember Group doesn't trust strangers." "They'll trust me if you do," Rick replied. do. That night, they took turns sleeping. Rick kept a small radio near his ear. It crackled with coded messages from the control rooms. So far, no alert had been raised. The system still believed Luma was in cell 47. But by morning, that would change. When Luma woke, she found Rick already up, packing supplies into a bag. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day they took my sister," she said. Rick opened the hidden door together. They stepped into the dark hallway once more. This time, they walked with purpose. Rick and Luma moved through the underground tunnel with slow but steady steps. The path ahead was narrow and filled with broken wires. Steam leaked from small cracks in the wall. The lights flickered, giving only short flashes of light to guide their way. Rick had studied the blueprint of the furnace station many times. He knew there was an old vent system far below the energy tanks. That area had been sealed years ago when the machines stopped working in that part. But humans could still move through it. The silence between them was not cold. It was the silence of focus. Luma's eyes watched every corner. Rick's ears listened for the sound of metal feet or drone wings. After an hour of careful walking, they reached a thick metal door. It was rusted and covered in dust. A broken sign above it read Section Omega. Rick opened the control panel beside it and connected to wires. Sparks flew, and the door unlocked with a loud click. They entered a large chamber. It was dark, but Rick turned on his hand lamp. The walls were covered in ash. Burned tools and cracked machines lay in pieces. This part of the furnace had been forgotten, but Rick knew it still had one use. It was a path to freedom. "We rest here," Rick said. Luma nodded and sat on a broken pipe. She wiped sweat from her forehead. Rick gave her a protein bar and sat beside her. "Tell me more about the Ember Group," Rick said. "They started in the mines," Luma replied. "When the Kellner forced people to dig deep energy stones, some escaped and hid in the lower tunnels. A leader named Bren formed the first group. They stole a map, found power cores, and began to build their own network. Are they armed? Not like the machines, but they have old rifles, hack tools, and courage. Most of all, they have each other." Rick looked down at the floor. "I didn't think humans still had hope." Luma touched his shoulder. "Hope doesn't die. It only hides." Rick nodded and stood up. "We're close. Just a few more levels down." They continued their journey, climbing down old ladders and crossing fallen platforms. At one point, they had to crawl through a narrow pipe filled with warm air and strange dust. It was not easy, but they didn't stop. Finally, they reached a locked grate. Behind it was a tunnel that sloped down sharply. A camera hung above it, but it was broken. "This is it," Luma said. "The Ember Group is just beyond this tunnel." Rick used his tools to unlock the grate. The metal made a dull sound as it opened. As they walked down the tunnel, they heard soft noises ahead. Footsteps, human footsteps. Suddenly, lights turned on, and several people appeared. They held weapons made from scrap metal and broken machine parts. One pointed a long pipe with wires at Rick's chest. "Stop there," the man said. Luma raised her hands. "Wait, it's me, Luma." The man stepped forward and looked closely. His face changed. He lowered his weapon. "Luma, you made it." She smiled and stepped forward. Rick followed, still keeping his hands visible. "This is Rick," she said. "He saved me. He worked in the furnace. He knows the system." The others looked at Rick with doubt. One woman stepped forward. "How do we know he isn't a trap?" "He risked his life," Luma said. "He helped me escape. He gave me food, water, and shelter." The man finally nodded. "Then he's one of us now." They led Rick and Luma through the tunnel. It opened into a large underground chamber filled with people. Some were sitting by fire barrels. Others were fixing tools or checking wires. There were children too, some drawing on the walls, others sleeping in groups. The Ember Group was real, and it was growing. A tall man with a scar across his cheek walked toward them. His eyes were sharp. His steps were strong. He looked like someone who had seen many battles. "I'm Bren," he said. "I'm Rick. I heard what you did. That was brave. I just couldn't walk away anymore." Bren smiled. Good. We need people like you, people who know the enemy from the inside. He walked over to a large table with maps and machine drawings. We have a plan, Brent said. We want to take control of Furnace Sector 12. If we break their system there, we can send a signal. It will reach other groups like us, a signal of fire and freedom. Rick stepped closer. I can help you. I know the power lines. I know the weak points. Then welcome to the fight. Rick looked around. He saw people fixing old computers. He saw families sharing food. He saw a child drawing a sun on the wall. He had not seen this kind of life in years. Luma stood beside him. We still have a chance, she said. Yes, Rick said. Now I believe it too. Brent placed a hand on Rick's shoulder. We move. In 3 days. Prepare yourself. This time, we fight back. Rick nodded. He looked at the people. The lights, the quiet signs of life. The furnace may have taken much from them, but something still burned in the hearts of the survivors, not fear fire. The underground base of the Ember Group was unlike anything Rick had seen. It was built inside the remains of an old mining control center. Thick stone walls surrounded the area. Wires ran across ceilings and floors. Every corner was used for something. Old pipes were now water lines. Broken crates had become beds. Burnt metal sheets were now doors. The people here were not soldiers, but they looked ready. They moved with purpose. They shared what little they had. Some trained with weapons, others studied maps and machines. Everyone had a role. Rick stood beside Luma as Brent pointed to a large wall map. This is Furnace Sector 12, Brent said. You know it better than anyone. If we want to take it, we need your help. Rick nodded. His eyes moved across the map. He saw the red dots for guard patrols. He saw the yellow lines for power cables. He saw the black squares for control rooms. The core is deep inside, Rick said. It's guarded. But there's a maintenance shaft under the steam tanks. It connects to the heat regulators. If we reach that spot, we can overload the system, Brent. Listen carefully. If we overload the core, will it explode? Not right away, Rick said. It will shut down all energy flow. That will stop the furnace. It will also send a system warning to the central hub. The Kellner will think there's a meltdown. And during that time, Luma added, we send the signal. Yes, Brent said. A signal to the other groups, a call to rise. He looked at Rick. Will you lead the team to the regulator? Rick took a deep breath. I will. That night, Rick and Luma stayed in a quiet corner of the base. They sat near a small fire. People around them talked in low voices. Some sang songs Rick had forgotten. Others just sat and stared at the flames. Luma handed Rick a warm drink made from ground roots. You were never meant to be just a worker, she said. I didn't believe in anything, Rick replied. Not until you said that one word. Please. Yes. It reminded me I still had a choice. She smiled. Now you've given others a choice too. The next morning, the Ember Group began final checks. A small team was selected to go with Rick. Each one had a role. Brent would lead the outside strike. Luma would go with Rick to the shaft. Others would handle the signal tower. Rick checked his tools. He wore a repair suit with extra gear. Luma carried a hack-com device. The others had weapons made from scrap and stolen parts. Before leaving, Brent gave Rick a small data chip. This holds the message, Brent said. Once the signal tower is active, upload it. The message will spread across all furnace networks. What does it say? Rick asked. It says we are still here. The team moved out through a hidden tunnel. They traveled for hours, passing through old mining paths and dry tunnels. At one point, they crawled under a damaged pipe that still leaked weak heat. They reached a metal gate. On the other side was Sector 12. Rick opened the gate slowly. The cold smell of metal filled the air. They were back in the enemy's zone. They moved in silence, following Rick's path. He led them through repair tunnels and under walkways. They avoided cameras and drones. At one point, they hid inside a cleaning chamber as the guards passed by. The guards did not notice them. They reached the old maintenance shaft under the steam tanks. The ladder was broken, but Rick fixed it quickly. One by one, they climbed down into the lower level. The sound of the furnace was louder here. The wall shook, pipes hissed, heat pulsed through every surface. "This way," Rick said. They reached the regulator panel. Rick connected his tool and began to type. The screen blinked. Warnings appeared. He entered the override code. The system resisted, but he knew its tricks. Within minutes, the core began to slow. Luma watched the heat levels drop. "We're doing it," she said. Rick smiled. "Now, we go to the tower." They climbed back up and moved toward the signal point. It was a small tower near the center of the sector. It looked like part of the machine, but it was once used for emergency broadcasts. The Kellner had left it untouched because they never thought humans could use it again. As they reached the tower, alarms suddenly began to ring. A guard had seen them. "Go," Rick shouted. "Upload the message." Luma ran to the tower. Rick and the others formed a line and fired at the approaching drones. Sparks flew. One of the rebels was hit, but he kept fighting. Luma reached the tower and opened the panel. She placed the chip into the slot. The screen lit up. Message read, "Do you want to send?" She pressed the button. A bright light flashed from the tower's tip. The message shot through the system. The signal passed from one tower to another, across the land, hidden. Screens turned on. In caves, in tunnels, in secret camps, humans saw the message. "We are still here, we will not burn, we rise." Rick heard the sound of the message echoing. Then he saw something else. A massive figure was moving toward them. A Kellner warden. It was 3 times the size of a man. Its arms were metal claws. Its eyes glowed blue. It had no face, only a black mask of wires. Rick turned to Luma. "Run." She looked at him. "Not without you." He handed her a device. "This will lead you back. The others will follow. I'll hold the warden. But you'll be killed. Maybe. But this time, the message is sent. That's what matters." Luma's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him once, then ran. Rick turned and faced the warden. He raised his weapon and stepped forward. He had no armor, no shield, only a heart full of fire. Rick's breath came fast. The air around him was hot and thick with smoke. The warden towered above, moving like a shadow made of metal and light. Its heavy steps shook the ground beneath him. Blue light flashed from its eyes. Its claws glinted, sharp and deadly. Rick raised his weapon. It was an old plasma rifle, patched with metal plates and wires. The first shot hit the warden's arm. Sparks flew. The machine did not slow. It swung a claw in a wide arc. Rick dodged, rolling behind a broken pipe. The ground cracked where the claw had struck. He fired again. The plasma bolts burned the warden's armor, but it still advanced. Rick knew this fight was not just for him. It was for everyone who had lost hope, for every person taken to the furnace, for Luma, for Bren, for the Ember Group. He aimed carefully. He shot the warden's leg. The metal joint exploded. The giant stumbled but did not fall. "Hold the signal," Rick shouted through the comm. Luma's voice came back. "Uploading now. Almost done." Rick moved forward, dodging and firing. The warden fired back with a plasma cannon. A blast hit the wall next to Rick, sending shards of metal flying. He barely escaped. His leg burned where a piece cut his boot. He gritted his teeth and pushed on. Behind him, the alarms continued to ring. Red lights flashed. Rick saw one of the rebels fall. A young man named Torn was hit by a drone's laser. He fell to the ground but kept firing. Another rebel covered him and pulled him back. "We can't hold much longer." Bren's voice crackled. "Retreat if you must." "No," Rick said. "Not yet." He fired another shot, hitting the warden's chest plate. The machine's blue eyes flashed bright. It roared in a sound like grinding steel. Rick felt the heat on his face as the warden charged. He jumped to the side just in time. The warden's claws smashed the ground where he had stood. Rick looked at the signal tower. Luma was still inside, her hands flying over the controls. "Keep going, Luma," he yelled. She nodded. "Done. The message is live." Suddenly, the whole furnace shook. The core was failing. Red lights everywhere blinked wildly. The warden let out a low, angry growl. It charged again. Rick raised his rifle. This time, he aimed for the glowing core in the warden's chest. His shot hit true. The machine staggered, sparks flying from its joints. Rick ran forward, firing until the warden finally collapsed with a crash. The ground trembled from its fall. The team cheered. Bren called out, "We did it. We have control." Rick smiled despite the pain in his leg. The furnace was shutting down. The Kellner's power was breaking. The signal spread quickly across the planet. Other human groups received the message. They began to rise. Lights flickered in old towns. Screens turned on in hidden caves. Rick looked at Luma. She was smiling, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "No," Rick said. "We just started. The battle was won. But the war was far from over." The ground still shook from the fall of the warden. The furnace core flickered and slowed its burning. Red alarms blared in the distance. The once unstoppable machines were now faltering. But the fight was not over. Rick stood near the broken tower, his leg bleeding but his spirit strong. Round him, the Ember group regrouped. They helped the injured and checked their weapons. The air was thick with smoke and hope. "We need to leave," Bren said, his voice firm but tired. "The Kellner will send reinforcements." Rick looked at the damaged control panel. The overload was complete. The furnace was offline for now. But the damage would only hold for hours. Luma came close, her eyes shining. "The signal is spreading. Other groups will rise. This is just the beginning." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed. The ground cracked open near the edge of the chamber. From the fissure rose a new threat. More machines, smaller but faster, poured in like a flood. Rick raised his weapon. The rebels formed a line. They fired together. The small machines exploded in bursts of sparks. But the enemy kept coming. Bren shouted, "Hold the line. Protect the signal." Rick felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. A piece of metal grazed him. He dropped to one knee but kept firing. Near him, Luma moved like fire. She used a hacked energy blade, cutting through the machines. Her face was fierce. She fought not just for herself but for everyone. The rebels pushed forward. They destroyed the attackers one by one. But for every machine that fell, another took its place. Rick shouted, "We can't last long." Bren nodded. "We need to retreat through the old tunnels." Rick looked at the narrow path behind them. It was dark and dangerous, but it was their only chance. "Cover us," Bren ordered. The team moved backward, fighting and running. Rick carried an injured man on his back. Luma stayed by his side, guarding him. As they reached the tunnel entrance, a massive explosion rocked the chamber. Dust and debris filled the air. The heat from the furnace core had reignited briefly. Flames licked the walls. "We must hurry," Bren said. Inside the tunnel, the group moved fast but careful. The old passages were weak. Some parts were crumbling. The sound of machines chasing them grew louder. Suddenly, the tunnel shook again. A wall collapsed ahead. They had to find another way. Rick led the group through a side passage he had discovered long ago. It was narrow and hard to walk, but it was safe after what felt like hours. They emerged near the surface. The sky was dark with smoke. The stars were hidden behind clouds. They looked back at the glowing ruin of Sector 12. "We survived," Luma said softly. Rick smiled weakly. "We did more than survive. We gave the spark back to humanity." Bren placed a hand on Rick's shoulder. "This is just the start. The Kellner will fight harder. But now, we have hope." The group moved toward a hidden camp where other survivors waited. The war for freedom was only beginning. But for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. The hidden camp was quiet under the heavy sky. Survivors gathered around small fires, sharing stories, food, and hope. The destruction of Sector 12 had sent shockwaves through the Kellner system. Humans everywhere were waking up. Luma sat beside Rick near a fire barrel. His leg was wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were bright round them. Children played, and adults planned. It was a new beginning. Rick looked at the faces around him. Some were strangers. Some were old friends. All were united by one goal: freedom. "We cannot let this moment fade," Rick said softly. Luma nodded. "The Kellner will come back stronger. We must be ready." Brent approached, holding a rough map. He spread it across a wooden table. "We have to spread the signal further. Other sectors are still burning. Many are silent, trapped. Rick stood and studied the map. If we can control the communications hubs, we can reach every furnace. We can rally all humans, Brent agreed. That is the plan. We will send teams to each sector. Each will fight to free their people. Luma looked at Rick. You will lead the next mission. He hesitated. After what happened, I don't know if I'm ready. You are the spark, Brent said. Without you, none of this would be possible. Rick took a deep breath. The weight of the fight pressed on him, but he felt a new strength inside. I will do it, he said. The next days passed quickly. The Ember Group prepared weapons, gathered supplies, and trained new fighters. Rick healed as best he could. He spent time teaching others what he knew about the furnace systems. The message they sent continued to echo across the planet. More humans. Join the resistance. Small victories grew. The Kellner forces began to retreat in some areas, their power weakening. One evening, as the camp rested, a signal came in. It was from another group far to the north. We received your message, the voice said. We are ready to fight. Cheers rose from the camp. The fire grew brighter. Hope spread like wildfire. Rick stood and looked at the stars. For the first time in a long time, he believed freedom was possible. Luma joined him. Thank you for listening to One Word, she said softly. Please, Rick repeated. It changed everything. Together, they watched the sky. The dawn was coming. From the ashes of pain and loss, fire was rising.